This episode is brought to you by Anchor.fm. If you haven't heard of Anchor, you should definitely check them out. It's a super easy tool that anyone can use to create and distribute their podcast. It has everything you need, and you can do it all from your computer or even your phone. Need your podcast cover art? There's a tool. Music and sound effects? They have you covered. Want to record on the fly? It's easy with the app. Now you may be saying to yourself, I already have a podcast. No worries, just create your account, upload, and publish to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Looking for some walking around money? Anchor connects you with advertisers who match your brand. It's a one-stop shop for all of your podcasting needs. Download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started.
Hello, welcome to BizQuik. I'm Julie.
And I'm Corey.
And today we have Blake Johnston out of Nashville, Tennessee. He's the owner of Outbound View, which focuses on sales and lead generation. Hey, Blake, how you doing?
That's right. You're listening to BizQuik. This is where Julie and Corey provide quick and useful information to small business owners. BizQuik is the podcast where small business owners get to showcase their businesses and receive expert advice and guidance in areas many entrepreneurs struggle with. And you, the listener, get solutions, tips, and tricks on real-world topics that many small business owners face. Julie and Corey are the experts small businesses hire when they need solutions. And the BizQuik podcast is just one way they deliver those solutions. Let's start the show.
I'm doing awesome. How are you guys today?
Doing well.
We're good. This is going to be a little bit of an unusual podcast in that we're going to kind of do a ping pong back and forth interview type with each other because we're going to dual purpose this particular episode for both of our podcasts.
100%. Yep. I'm looking forward to kind of diving in and getting your guys' perspective on quite a few things.
Yeah,
we're looking forward to it.
Exactly. We love that you focus on small businesses, so it's right in our arena. You want to just kind of start off and
for sure
talk a little bit about what our businesses are. So
that would be great. Yep, I'll kick us off. So I'm the owner of Outbound View. We focus exclusively on sales and marketing, but more on the lead generation side of things. So we'll do things like cold calling, outbound marketing, distribution, kind of everything in the prospecting level of finding new customers, as well as expanding existing customers. And we work with anywhere from companies with a few employees all the way up to some larger companies as well. What we find like our ideal customers, people are really trying to figure out that lead gen model and get consistency, in their sales pipeline.
Is there a particular industry that you focus on or a particular customer type?
Yeah, we do almost everything we do falls more on the corporate side, meaning, we're calling a lot into companies who are selling into HR, selling into compliance, selling into larger customers. We don't do a lot of, reaching out to chiropractors and small retailers and regional stuff. Pretty much everyone that kind of works with us typically has a solution, that's in the $10,000 and up mark per year. Because there's a certain number where it makes sense to deploy things like inside sales, which is really where our specialty is.
And you're doing it's B2B work that you're doing?
Yeah, okay. 100%.
Yeah. And for SB Pace, we really have small business focused, two, I would say, key areas that are right in our, as the new saying now is zone of genius. I still like to say sweet spot though, which would be helping people launch new businesses and then helping owners go from working in the business to on the business is really our key specialties.
Yeah. No, it's so difficult to do because we're a small business. Yeah, I mean, we have basically 10 employees and a bunch of contractors. I experience this on a regular basis of, how much time can you spend in the day-to-day with the customers and making sure things are operating versus kind of taking a step back and saying, where are we actually going and what are the goals? And, it's something that our business is, actively going through right now. So I know every CEO struggles with that.
Yeah, that's a challenge for small business owners.
And it really is. I mean, when we talk about working, in your business versus on your business, just the whole people, they're moving a mile a minute, and they think that they're getting work done when they're really not going anywhere. And that's something that we see with a lot of people is that they just doing work doesn't mean you're actually doing anything productive.
I had a realization with a mentor recently, and I'd love to get your guys' take on this. I was describing to him, this is someone who, recently started kind of a mentor relationship. And I was describing our business to him. And one of the things he used was what he called opportunistic revenue, right? He's like, how much of your revenue is opportunistic versus very intentional? And so I kind of took a step back and, was trying to kind of analyze exactly what that meant. And his premise was, you have a team that's good at marketing. You're good at marketing. Your co-founder's good at marketing. So you guys can kind of market your way into random revenue, honestly, because we can do content marketing and know inbound and SEO. But just because a company comes to your website and fills out a contact form and then they turn into a customer still doesn't mean that they're an ideal customer. They just found you. And so that thought of like opportunistic revenue versus really intentional is something that, we're struggling through and trying to figure out.
I have not heard that term before, but it makes sense. And what's interesting is that how like something happens or you make a decision and then all of a sudden you just start seeing like all of these things lining up, right? Or all the conversations start going in a particular direction. Probably about 2 weeks ago, a little less than, we had made the decision to get a lot more intentional about who we were marketing to and who we wanted to be working with, simply because, in all honesty, we would get frustrated with the number of people who recognize they need help, but are unwilling to do the work to get the help, right? Because there's only so much we can do on our side. And we can draw the strategy for you. We can give you the map, but you have to do some of that work. And there's an upfront heavy investment of time when you're moving from working in the business to working on it, right? And so as we've made the decision to be more and more intentional about who we want to work with, then we have seen more and more people that are coming towards us that have the exact same mindset. And it just was, it's unless you were really looking for it or aware that it happened, it was a really, really slight shift on our part. But the opportunistic revenue, sometimes is harder, right? Because they don't fit right into your zone or your sweet spot. And so you're working harder to get those customers happy.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. I'd be interested to get your guys' take on something, because a lot of the people who listen to our podcasts are like marketers, sales leaders, and they're kind of like small business owners, right? Because they have a little team of 10 people. Sales leaders, they have a responsibility, they have a revenue number. And I think the same thing happens with sales leaders and marketing leaders and every leader, where you try and figure out how much can I be in the day-to-day versus the actual planning, right? The planning and the strategy and working on it versus like being in it. What are your guys' just recommendations, like some high level things for those folks to think about? Because, most individual contributors kind of own their own little business, and so do most sales and marketing leaders as well.
3 things come to mind, and they're all kind of intertwined. The first, especially for leaders and small business owners, like one of the hardest things for them to give up is control. And so learning how to delegate, which is not something that you can, I'm sure there's probably a class out there, but that's just something you need to learn how to do. That's important. And the way you feel comfortable about doing that is by having, well-documented systems and processes, and then proper training. because with all of that, then you have the people out there doing what they need to do, and you can more on strategy instead of being in the trenches with everybody else. I think those three things right there are probably the best in my opinion.
Yep.
Agreed. I think the systems and processes are critical, especially for small business owners. And we tend to think, not so much, or maybe they don't get the focus that marketing does, or, going out, like paying attention to your financials, but they really, in many ways, that's everything is driven from how your systems and processes are implemented.
Yeah. We, because we do a lot of outbound marketing work, there's list building and there's building messaging, and then there's specific follow-ups. And then if this happens, you have to do this. There's all these little things that early on we weren't documenting it. It was kind of like it was myself and a few people who've been doing this forever. And as the team gets bigger, if it's not documented, you can't coach against it. But that, it takes a while, but it's absolutely critical. Makes a ton of sense.
For your business, doing the lead gen and inside sales and all of that, I'm sure there's probably, you said earlier, I think it was before we started this, that there's a certain point where people come to you because they need help. They've reached a certain level and they need to outsource, that work to somebody else. And I'm sure that most of those people, most of your clients were probably having the same problems before. So there's like some commonalities with your clients. What are like some of the major pitfalls that people have when they're out there, looking for leads and that type of stuff?
Well, what typically happens if it's in like a growing, healthy business is that, you hire a couple salespeople and those people are so busy closing that they don't have time to prospect. Right. And so you make the decision, do you hire another salesperson that's, a closer and then expect them to prospect? Or do you start to, segment and use kind of less expensive folks that their only job is prospecting, that you can kind of nurture along? And so that's the most common, is just they're not prospecting because they don't have enough time, because they're hopefully closing other business or doing other things. So that's the healthy example. We have an unhealthy example though, right? Where a lot of people come to us have tried inside sales. They've tried cold calling, cold emailing, they've kind of dipped their toe in it a little bit, but it's not a dip your toe in situation, right? The people who really struggle with inside sales, they hire one person and then don't give them technology, processes, data. They're just like, hey, go figure it out. And, if the CEO can't figure it out and the head of sales can't figure it out, the kid that's 1 year out of college isn't going to figure it out, right? So, typically you want to hire inside sales people or people that are specific for prospecting, really when you have it figured out, right? So, and you've decided to make an investment. And an investment in inside sales is typically going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. You can, once again, you can dip your toe in with sending a bunch of mass emails, but to really do it the right way, when you talk about if you're dedicating 2 people, you're over $100,000 if those are full-time, plus the things that they need. So it's not a small little decision, and people think that it is.
Yeah. I'm curious, when you talk about cold calling and cold emailing, do you think there's a place for that in every business, regardless of industry? Or do you think that it is more suited for certain industries and there's places where it just doesn't make sense for businesses to do it?
Yeah, there are industries where if you run the math behind it, it becomes very tough to justify things like cold calling. Right? If you're calling into IT departments, they pick up the phone 2% of the time. It's pretty tough. You better sell a pretty expensive solution or have a pretty high conversion to make the math work, that you can have enough conversations to build enough sales pipeline. Same thing with marketers. Marketers don't pick up the phone that often. So you run into issues there. It's pretty rare though. Most small businesses, they start growing because of the founders network. And you're typically cold emailing or meeting somebody here or doing that. I think there's a difference between doing it at scale, which is, working through 500 new prospects a month and making 1,000 plus dials and sending emails versus dipping your toe. I mean, at pretty much every industry you can dip your toe in it, but that doesn't mean you should have a dedicated person doing it.
We're going to take a quick break to let our friend Steve Lanner tell you about his business, Lashley Street Roasters.
Hey, this is Steve, head roaster and owner of Lashley Street Roasters. And my goal is to get you the freshest cup of coffee possible. I don't roast the beans until you submit your order, shipped out within 48 hours. So when my coffee arrives, you've got the freshest coffee you've ever had. Check out LashleyStreetRoasters.com to submit your order online, and make sure you submit now so you start off 2021 with the right amount of caffeine.
Thanks, Steve. And you can connect with Steve with the links in the show notes. Now back to the podcast.
I think we've talked about this before offline, but I am very curious about your thoughts on, well, specifically, I want to ask about Zoom Info, but if I know I'm going to ask about it because, we have a client who is just in love with that solution and really thinks that it's just simply the best solution, but it's really cost prohibitive. And he's a small business owner, new business. And I believe, me personally, that there are a lot of other options out there beyond Zoom Info. But sometimes I struggle with trying to articulate to this client, like the different paths that they can take that are going to cost them less money, but will generate revenue.
Oh, for sure. I mean, to know like the data world, you really got to be in it. And to use something like Zoom Info, which is, let's say baseline $15K a year. I mean, it can be quite a bit more than that. But you better be doing outbound at scale, right? I mean, you better, like, if that's what you're going to spend on data, then you better have full-time people dedicated to it. Like, to have a $20,000 data solution for someone who's making 10 calls a day is crazy, right? I mean, it doesn't add up. So it depends. If you're looking for email only, there's a million email only solutions that are just cheap. I mean, so inexpensive. You're talking $50 a month inexpensive for probably enough email data. Now, email is getting harder and harder every day, right? So at some point you might need to get phones, but it depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're not serious about outbound, you probably don't need Zoom Info or to be spending 20 grand on data. You'd be better off, with a worse data solution and an intern you're paying couple grand a month to actually do the outreach,
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. So we looked at Zoom Info, and I just don't for us personally, I don't feel like cold calling is, at least right now, it's not really the best way for us. It's not really the right approach. Cold emailing, absolutely. But we, came up with somebody that in my network had recommended. He's like, hey, I got a tool. It's like $300 a year, and the data is really good. But when you're running a search, you're going to have to go through and kind of clean it up a little bit because you might get some, results that aren't part of it. So, we spent, I think we got it on sale for Black Friday. We spent like $240 on this tool called Lead Scrape that gives us a ton of output results. And then you spend, 30, 40 minutes cleaning up the results. And I've never had I used it on a trial basis beforehand, and I've never had a single email bounce from it. And
Wow.
I've gotten, like 5 or 6, like good leads out of using it. And it's, I'm like, that's cheap. $250 for a year is nothing.
Yeah, that's crazy too. I mean, even on, your bounce rates are absurd. I've never used that specific tool, but even with the best tools, you still see 10% bounce typically. And yeah, you'd be better off, let's say, doing that and getting a virtual admin off Upwork for $8 an hour to clean and to do all, admin type work all day long, versus something like that. You can really spend a lot of money on data. Like we are Zoom Info users. And the reason that we're Zoom Info users is we put it up against 15 other companies on call data, and we do a lot of calling. It's the basis of our business. and their data's the best there. But most companies don't do what we do, right? They're not making that level with that many calls.
What's and this might be a really naive question, but I'm not the mathlete on this call, so I feel okay asking. What's the break even point for how many calls you really should be making a day to make Zoom Info be a good buy?
Yep. I mean, you have to run the math against your persona, right? So you would want to look at dial to connect rate. So let's take a normal corporate title like VP of HR. VPs of HR answer the phone 5% of the time. So you need to make 100 dials to have 5 conversations. So you never want to fall below 10% conversion of conversation to meeting. So that means if you're at 10% and you're only having 5 conversations, making 100 dials every 2 days, you're setting a meeting. So that would equal out, if you're just running that out across 20 business days, you're setting a decent amount of meetings, making 100 dials. But because we know this world, you'd be much better off paying $500 or $1,000 a month for a really good dialer, adding that data on top and having 20 conversations a day.
Wow.
Right. So most people think, because like when I came up in sales, it was like you make 50 calls a day. Like that it doesn't work. The numbers don't work out unless you have 20% dial to connects, which, unless you're calling plumbers or a retail business, you're never going to have.
And it's funny, you kind of bring up a point in there that a lot of, especially small business owners, problems that they have is when we get back, going back to like delegation and training and all that, it's paying somebody to do the work that you shouldn't be doing. Mm-hmm. And that's something that a lot of people, they don't grasp it. And like, I remember I worked in restaurants for years, and one of my business partners, she was just crazy when it came to like just pinching pennies everywhere she could. And it was one of those things where I'm like, we have to spend some money if we want to grow. Like,
Yeah.
So that was always an argument that we had. But
well, you guys know this world, especially working with small business owners, a lot more than I do. But the questions that we get, because we have a lot of small businesses that reach out to us, the questions that we get around where they spend money, like that, most of them are very concerning, right? Because, I'm a small business owner. I don't really know sales or marketing. What do I do? Like I go to an agency. Mm-hmm. So you go to an agency, and I don't care. Like I've worked in agency world. Anything you do at an agency is $1,000. Like they can't make money unless it's $1,000. Doesn't matter whether it's SEO or paid or whatever. A brochure, a video can be $5,000. I mean, you get into looking at marketing budgets specifically and where that money is being spent for small businesses, and it is all over the board, and most of it are things that you could find on Fiverr for $100, or $50, or just all of these things, paying for graphic design and paying for all these things that don't actually lead to more revenue. But it's really tough to coach people. It'd be like, coaching me on finance. I mean, I know sales and marketing, like finance is not my thing. I know it at a high level, but that there's so many mistakes made there.
Yeah. And that's, another good point there is that, just knowing what you're good at, knowing what you're not good at. And for small business owners and, people, managers, whoever, knowing enough that, you can get by, but not like, we have a lot of people when it comes to finance, they just stick their head in the sand. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to worry about it. But you need to know it at least on a high level. You need to be able to look at a P&L and understand why, costs are what they are and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I think it's been the year of a lot of small business owners searching for the silver bullet, right? They're making and probably most frequently, in either finance or sales and marketing, right? Like how do I better control my finances, or where do I find money that I can, put towards the finances? And then there's how do I get more clients on the acquisition side? Like, what am I doing wrong? How do I get there? And people desperately searching for answers in those two areas because of how difficult the year has been for so many small business owners. And they're just unsure of where to turn or how to pivot on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's, blocking and tackling that most companies miss, not just small businesses, when it comes to marketing. I mean, there are things like invest in your website, invest in content, invest in SEO. Like, over the years, you'll never regret that you invested in SEO and now you're organically ranking, for certain terms. And a lot of it is, to your point, it's chasing money. Like you're chasing revenue and making a lot of short-term decisions.
Yeah, that has been our guidance to clients and just, small business owners that we've talked with over the past couple of months is content, like push the content and just get out there, be providing value through that content whenever you can, and steering people to reach anybody. Has been the guidance that we've been giving to small business owners. The big guys they're gonna outbuy the ads every day of the week. So there's no point in even doing it.
Yep. Yeah. Especially if you don't, well, same with, like I mentioned, if you're not going to put in enough time and money and effort to really figuring it out, like these things you don't just turn on and all of a sudden you just have an influx of leads. There's usually even when you're doing it the right way, a 2-month period of that didn't work, this did work, of dialing it in. And that 2-month period typically will cost you, 10 to 20 grand. So you have to be ready for it.
Yeah, it's crazy. 100%. So what are some of the common things that you've seen, themes that you've seen this year from business owners?
Yeah, I'll go off your content theme. There are so many cold emails going on, not as many cold calls, but so many cold emails out there. There's so much outreach going on LinkedIn that is basically follows this theme. Hi, my name is Blake. I work at X company. We do this thing. These are the companies we work with. Do you want to meet for 15 or 20 minutes? Like if you look at all the cold emails you get, that's where most of them, that's kind of, they're around that theme. A lot of the things we do are like, we just distribute the best content for people, right? So if you have a really good case study, send that case study to 100 prospective clients, try and get them to read it. And then the chance of them coming to a call and then that turning into a prospect is much higher than just blindly asking for meetings.
Yeah.
Right. So, when you create that good content, don't just throw it on your blog, distribute it. That could be a cold email. So we do a lot of outreach that's like, hey, do you have 30 seconds? The only reason I'm reaching out is because we have a case study with Boston Children's and you're via VP of HR at a hospital. Like, can I send you the case study? Walk away, send it, and they come back. So content first is something that we do a lot of.
That's a brilliant strategy in terms of like leveraging the case study like that. And rather than putting everything into the blog, sending it out to prospects with sort of an introduction as to why they're getting it or why you think that material might be valuable to them. I will say as a side note, I did not realize, and maybe it's just happened this year, LinkedIn is predatory.
It is. Yeah, the LinkedIn bots and there's a lot there.
Sure. I used to think it was just Facebook. I'd be like, oh my God, everybody's selling something on Facebook. But then I noticed, especially on the back half of this year, just hundreds of emails a week of people with like, they make a connection, you connect with them, and then their next move is to try and sell you something. I'm like, do you want to know what problems I might have before you're like, everybody wants to sell me lead generation. Everybody.
Everyone wants to sell us lead generation when we do it.
You do it.
So
that's funny.
I know it's the LinkedIn automation is just, it's gotten out of hand, and it was really good a couple years ago, but it's tough to do that. I mean, you really got to be in some niches for that to work. Now there are ways to do LinkedIn, what I would say is the right way, but not, not just randomly pitching people, the second they connect with you.
Yeah. Agreed. You have to offer some type of value, but also like, I don't know, maybe sometimes I feel like Corey and I are really like the oddballs when it comes to, coaching and consulting, because we're really focused very hard on trying to understand what the problem is and what your goals are before we're ever trying to sell you anything, right? We don't want to be the people that are like selling clients things they don't need, because we just don't ever want to be in that situation. And so we spend a lot of time up front, like really understanding what the problems are. And I don't see that from a lot of people.
No, not at all. You guys have to brag a little bit on your book.
Oh yeah.
What made you write a book? How is it so successful? Talk a little bit about your book.
Well, we wanted to punish ourselves. So we decided that we were going to write a book. And it all started back in it went hand in hand with us starting our consulting firm this year, where we were just talking to small business owners, just all over, friends and family, just trying to figure out what was going on, how we could help, that type of stuff. And just realized that this blindsided everybody, but we realized that most people were more prepared than they thought, but there was a lot of preparations that could have been done ahead of time that they should just do as small business owners. So the book's called Seriously Now What? A Small Business Guide to Disaster Preparedness. And that's what it is. But the first 2/3 of the book are really about building a strong foundation and knowing your business, knowing your customers, knowing your people, and having all of that set so that, even if a UFO landed in your warehouse tomorrow, you could still kind of survive it because you have, a strong foundation. And then the last third is all about actually building out a disaster plan. And that's pretty much it. Did I cover everything?
You did. And it's, I think one of the reasons that it's really has been successful is because I would say the most common piece of feedback that we get on it is that it's a business book that's enjoyable to read. There's, stories and examples in there, and there's a lot of exercises. It comes with a workbook, and I think we wrote it knowing that it would help small business owners, and that it would also be a good lead generator for us. But more than anything, I think we've realized that it's really helping business owners with having that solid foundation for their business. So,
yeah, of the, when somebody reads it, right, what percentage of them have the major check marks, right? Like, from the range of I'm not prepared at all to, you guys would say they're pretty buttoned up, or most small business owners, which side do they fall on?
I'd say most of them are probably somewhere in the middle, and the ones who read it and take the time to do the exercises as they go through it are really buttoned up by the time they're done. And we've had a number of people who have reported back to us that they did every single exercise. So it took them like 3 months to get through the book because they did everything and they wanted to just have all the information correct. And other people have gone through it in like a week or less and have had most of the stuff already done beforehand, or just skipped it in total, I guess.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because a lot of the stuff in there, people might have kind of like an idea. They've, they've got it in their head, but they haven't written it down on paper or anything like that. And, the only real barrier to entry to most businesses is cash. So, a lot of people, they don't have that business background. They don't know, what an ROI is or a SWOT is or anything like that. So, it's helping people who don't have that business background essentially kind of get a crash course in at least that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Very cool.
It was interesting to write it, for sure.
I started writing a book. I wonder how many people have, said that. I started writing a book and then got I don't know, I think it was around 50 or 60 pages. And I was like, I'm never going to finish this. So I just turned it into blog posts, like that.
Good content. Yeah. I would guess one of the only reasons that we finished it. Well, first off, we're good at follow through. When we say we're going to do something, we'll actually execute on it. But we paid somebody up front to help us map out the entire book. And I think because we had a financial investment in that, we're getting this money back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
this book.
And we also, told everybody pretty publicly that we are writing a book. So
that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, one of the most public ways was I don't know if you're familiar with who Jesse Itzler is, so he's married to Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx.
Yeah.
And he has this pretty big community, this Build Your Life Resume community. And every Monday he used to do these Facebook Lives with this community that he has formed. And one Monday he just randomly was pulling people into this Facebook Live. And so he pulled me into the Facebook Live and he's like, Julie, what are you doing this summer? What are you up to? And I'm like, well, started a business and, Corey and I are writing a book and it'll be out in like 6 weeks. And he's like, I want to support you. I want to buy as many copies as I can. Tell me when it's done. And I'm like, okay. And he did. Yeah. He actually bought 100 copies and then donated them back to us to give to small business owners. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was really,
cool.
Really generous of him.
You want to start wrapping this thing up?
Yeah, let's start wrapping it up.
All right.
You want to tell our listeners how they can find you, Blake?
For sure. Yep. Go to outboundview.com. Or you can find me on LinkedIn if you search Blake Johnston Outbound View. I'll come right up. Either of those are the easiest way.
Perfect. And you're about to find out how you can get us. So first, thank you for doing this kind of co-podcast with us today. This was a lot of fun. And hopefully the listeners get a lot of content out of it. Also want to let everybody know that the information for contacting Blake will be in our show notes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. I will do the same, and obviously I'll link to the book, which everyone should check out. Like I said, I think there's more to it. Obviously, it's great for small business owners, but it's also great for just anyone who's owning and planning and doing all those types of things. And then give out your website as well for my listeners.
Sure. We have our website, which is SBPACE, stands for Small Business Planning, Advising, Coaching, Expertise. So sbpace.com. And we also have our podcast website, which is bizquickpodcast.com. And all of our social media and ways to connect with us are on those websites as well.
Awesome. I love it.
Yeah, it was great. Well, thanks a lot, Blake.
Yeah, thanks, Blake. This was great.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it.